So here we are in Gloria Mundi. Triggered off a couple of players' actions to begin with. First guy, the green player, played a green card mainly because his only options were something he would lose or a green card, or have to pay a fee for, which might not have been that terrible. By playing green, he gave benefits to the black player, who got 2 more spaces and is well in the lead. And also the blue player has gotten the ability to spend white cubes to get spaces and has actually passed because black also played a green card. Black also bought another space generator. Ooh, and he gets 2 more spaces for having bought it. So he's way in the lead at this point. And everybody should be looking at trying to figure out ways to crush him. The problem is, it's kind of hard to target someone if they're far away from you in the turn order. So this guy can do things that affect him very easily. He can land on spaces. He can not bribe the goth on things that will cause this player to lose a turn. Now, he also paid to prevent a farm loss, so the goth is being bribed at this point. We go to the red player, who's way in the back of the pack back here. Not last, but close. Who has some cards, but they're not really terribly valuable cards. We'll see what comes up, but he does now. He has a pile of cash, so he might even be able to buy something in the high end of things. And he finds something cool that would give him 4 spaces. Requires a white to play, and that may be the best thing there. On the other hand, there are things like this which produce a lot of whites and give almost as many spaces. Something like this which could produce more green. Something like this which has the capacity of producing purples, which are cool. So I don't know what he's going to do. I'm going to step away. He does have a problem, though. If he doesn't bribe, he's losing a city, and that's ugly. Well, we've made it around the board, and pretty much nobody's doing much in terms of gaining new buildings. The production on this side of the board is just so low, and the options that were out didn't work well with what they had in hand. But they have been paying the goth off. For better or worse, instead of just boning the next guy down the line, they started paying him off. Of course, cities have been paying out a couple of times, which was an advantage for him. He's been draining his greens in order to grab more movement, and he's gotten down to here. I don't think anybody can catch him, but it's hard to tell. There's still another time around at least before the goth goes, and I just don't see how anyone can make up that much ground. Green cards haven't been coming out. Greens are good for him, but they're also good for the blue player. I don't know. We'll see. Alright, around the board again, and the goth is just wiping out whatever the kind of weaker player's position is. I'm not sure if it's a situation where in this many players, looked online briefly, and I see that they suggest, at least that one person suggests, the game is just chaotic in this many people. Maybe 4 is a better number. Well, maybe they shouldn't release a 6-player game if it's problematic in that state. But I'm actually wondering, because of the way the ordering is, whether there's an inherent advantage on the people towards the beginning of the line. Maybe not. This guy went first and isn't doing terribly well. It's a couple of people who maybe got the lucky purchases who are doing well here. In particular, we see the black player I don't see anybody catching black. I mean, look at this distance here and the amount of time left. But I will finish it up because I tend to do that. As the game is winding down, it's moved here. I may have forgotten some of the times, but the last two players have produced and bought a building solely for the points that that building creates immediately. There's just no chance of there being enough turns, basically. We're looking at 1, 2, 3 more player actions before the game's going to end. So people are just trying to grab those last couple of points. Black is clearly way in advance. But green managed to build a building and go forward. Take a look at whether other people can get any edge on the track. It doesn't look like anybody can really even change the ordering, though, I'd guess. Green might have been was not that far from blue, but otherwise I just don't think anybody's going to get a chance to even shake things up at all. And now we're at the last play. The Goth goes into Rome. The game's over. Black players won, like we saw, by a significant amount. Orange over here was actually able to buy a big enough card to pop them just ahead of red, who looks like they're in much better shape at this point, but they just aren't. It's an interesting situation, even though, obviously I didn't know what I was doing in the game. I think I got a bit of a flavor for it. I'll come back and talk a little bit about it because I think there's some value to that, even though I don't feel like I got a really good picture of this game from the play, the play choices, etc., that I had to make weren't entirely random, but they probably are laughable to anybody who really kind of gets the game. But I may be able to provide a little bit of thoughts about it. I'll do it on this same video. Okay. Oh boy. Gonna have to adjust this one. So, just finished up with Gloria Mundi. I'm left with one clear thought about it, which is that it obviously isn't something that you can just pick up and get what you should do. Unlike most games where you're constantly producing, trying to build up your productive capability, etc., here it's hard to hold on to it because of the movement of the Goth, as he's moving, and the destructive capabilities that are built up there. So as the game goes on, and this is kind of a nice balancing factor, I think, even if you're doing well in terms of your productive capability at one point, you may well be able to be taken down by the actions. Now, I haven't figured out sort of the mechanisms that a player should use and what choices need to be made to get to that decision. One of the worries that I have is that something like this may not have a whole lot of plays in it with a particular group. May explain why I got it used, and somebody obviously went through some efforts, putting these little cups together, etc. Strikes me as more expensive or more effort than baggies, I guess. Maybe they just do this with all their little cube games. But it looks like it's a fairly played version, as though they got their 10 plays or whatever you can get out of it, and then put it up for sale, saying, when we bring this up, it's just not different enough to be engaging for our group again and again. And it's got a fairly large footprint in terms of the box size, which we is, of course, a pain in the ass for me for shipping, which, you know, when you've got those choices, do I want this big box game that I'm going to drag out, you know, maybe once a year or something, and we're done studying it, basically. I think that kind of player will get their playings out of it fairly quickly, because I don't think that it's something that has a lot of different strategy options or a lot of different choices to how the play runs. One of the reasons why the play seems to not vary too much is these cards. Now, they show up kind of at random. These are the buildings. These are the only random factor in the game. And they could massively change the game if they were really important, but they're not all that important as I see it. The few that are these ones that have the ability to move spaces. Maybe I'm missing something again. Maybe it's just an early play, but productivity doesn't seem to last very long. So really the question is, whatever you spend on a card and whatever protection you spend to keep that card, what do you get out of it? Well, you get spaces towards victory for every card you build, and some cards create more spaces that allow you to move closer to Africa. And those seem to be the most valuable cards by far, at least to my uninformed view of the game. Because it doesn't look like you can keep your productivity or your productive capabilities in play very long, at least in 6 players. Maybe in 2 or 3 or 4 players, you have a lot more control. You're playing the production cards more often, so you're able to put defenses up against losing your good cards, and that could change the game significantly. I don't think the game is probably best in 6, but I'm not about to try playing a 4-player game to see how I feel about it there. I've got way too many games to look at. It's something I would get a kick out of bringing to a group, I think. It's a very, very different flavor from most of the Euros that I've seen. Most of them, at least, a lot of them seem to be very much about what you can build and what kind of little economic engine you can put together to get you to your victory conditions. In this one, your economic engine is constantly being torn apart by the play. You're not progressing. At best, you can kind of hold to a point. Early on, you have nothing. So, I mean, to some extent, you do progress because you have to get to the point where you can actually build those cards. Those cards are vital to winning the game. But as you keep going, it seems like you're going to lose the very things that are holding you, that are pushing you forward. Again, that may change a little bit in less players. Less players, you might have enough power to be able to protect what you have. But the whole mechanism of, and maybe that's what's exciting to me, is the 6-player game where it is more chaotic. The whole mechanism of being able to build things and try to build up something that's going to get you closer to Africa, more victory points essentially. All the while, every action that's taken is destroying things at the same time. I think that's very cute and very different from what you see in most games that people like tend to play. In some ways, that I'm using up I'm building these resources to try to get something, but I'm losing resources at the same time. Reminds me vaguely of war games in the sense of, the big strategic simple ones where everything that you're building up is expendable, and it's very much like that in this, and that's very intriguing to me. Unfortunately, I'm still not feeling terribly comfortable. I mean, not with the rules. The rules are fairly light and simple. I may have made some mistakes, but when you go through and try to figure out what am I supposed to do, what can I do to prevent myself from losing what I've got, I don't know why the black player managed to get the lead that he did, other than he got a card that gave him the extra bonuses in movement. But beyond that, other people got that. How did he get to the point where he could hold on to the cards that he cared about? And really, nobody could take them away from him. He was losing stuff. Everybody lost stuff. He lost everything by the end. But he held on to them long enough that he was able to get that imposing lead. Other people in other positions were not so, and I really feel like it was other players were protecting him somehow, or it may just be the cycle of the track favors certain positions. That's possible. It seems like that cycle gets disrupted by the bribery actions, however. So it's quite possible there that if I understand the ebb and flow of that track well enough, I could understand how to plan for the future as to keeping my cards protected. Right now, I don't have a good view on that at all, though. It's definitely a puzzle that I'd like to figure out in playings. Probably not solitaire, though. It's not something that's terribly appealing. Solitaire, your resources are hidden, so your likely actions shouldn't really be known to everyone else, and having them all out in the open playing as one person definitely takes that away, and there isn't a lot more than trying to guess what your opponents are going to do. Anyway, like I said, it's something that I could see putting out again with people. The large box, the large footprint of the components, and the components are very nice. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're great components. It's just, it's got a big footprint on the table, and in terms of transport and in terms of storage, one that makes me wonder, how likely it is to get played. It's not something you bring to a coffee shop, right? It's something that you have at somebody's house. You might haul it with you, but I don't tend to bring things this big if I can help it. So, unless people are rotating where they play, it's not something that's going to be easy to transport. Because it looks like a fairly short game. They claim it takes an hour. It took me longer, I think. But, for something that short, I'm not really thrilled with the idea of bringing a huge copy of it with me. Anyway, these were just first thoughts and a look at something that I think is kind of an interesting game. And it might be much, much cooler upon playing it a little bit more. I just do have that question of, will it then lose its flavor once you go beyond a little bit more playing? I don't know, but it's cute, and I suggest you take a look at the videos to see, the actual play, to see if it would interest you, because it is definitely a little different from most games that I've seen.